Hey and welcome back to my channel. Today we're gonna have a look at another great game, this time played by Magnus Carlsen. This game is from the 2018 Pro Chess League and it is really a favorite of mine. Because what Magnus Carlsen is usually known for is his incredible ability to grind out the smallest of advantages and his near perfect endgame play. It's quite rare for him to have a game in which he's all out attacking and playing flashy sacrifices and just playing aggressively from the start on. But this game really is exactly that. And if you wouldn't know that Magnus played it, you could think that somebody like Mikhail Tal was on the black side here. So let's take a look. The game started with e4 and d5, the Scandinavian defense by Magnus. White takes. Here the main line of course is taking with the queen, and then after something like knight to c3 attacking the queen, queen a5 and d4. Black often gets a rather passive but solid position. But that's not what Magnus played here. He made his aggressive intentions clear from the start and played knight to f6. He decides against taking the pawn right now and therefore enters gambit territory. White would have the chance to defend the pawn now, but he instead plays pawn to d4, just expanding in the center. Magnus plays bishop to g4, attacking the queen, and this is the starting point of the so-called Portuguese gambit. Black doesn't really care about the pawns in the center and instead really goes for rapid development of his pieces. The bishop is attacked and it moves back to f5. Here, the most critical line and the one that gives an objective advantage to white goes with g4, bishop retreats and then pawn to c4, now defending the pawn in the center. After something like pawn to e6, white just plays knight to c3, and here white's goal is pretty much to stabilize the pawns in the center instead of taking more of them. The engine gives white a pretty good advantage here, but it's still tricky practically. In a blitz or rapid game, this is still a dangerous weapon for black for sure. In the game, c4 was played immediately. Now black plays pawn to e6 with the goal to undermine white's pawn center and of course also to get out the bishop. White takes on e6. Instead of retaking, black still just develops the pieces with knight to c6. White takes again on f7 with a check and the king has to take. So let's talk about this opening. What is happening here? Well, first of all, black has sacrificed 2 pawns. White has 7 of them, black only 5. In return for that, black has achieved a massive lead in development. Both of the knights and one of the bishops are already out, with the other bishop being able to join very soon. Another point is that white's king is completely in the center and in the open, and therefore makes a great target for black to attack. So to sum up, white got some material, but black in return has a lot of activity and big attacking chances. The best move now according to the engine would be knight to e2, but after knight to b4, threatening the fork on c2, this also looks very scary. And actually, if we're gonna follow the most played moves in the database, we can see that also here white is getting in trouble very soon. After something like knight to a3, trying to defend, now knight d3 check, the king has to go to d2, bishop b4 another check, the knight blocks and now queen takes on d4. This position is completely lost here for white after just 11 moves. In the game instead, white here played another natural looking move with bishop to e3. Black keeps the rapid development up and plays bishop to b4, giving a check. Here, white chose to move the king up to f2 to escape the checks, and even though it's not liked by the engine, I do think it makes sense, because an alternative like knight to c3 would run into a line like rook to e8, pinning the bishop, and after the queen would defend it, then the knight could already take here on d4, and again this position looks super scary for white. On c2 there's again a fork being threatened, the e3 bishop hangs in the air, the knight on c3 is pinned. I can really understand how you do not want to get in this situation. So white played king f2 and the rook still came to e8. Now white developed the knight and here Carlsen played an incredible move with rook takes e3, sacrificing the rook. The king of course has to take, and the point is now that the king really is stuck completely in the middle of the board on an open line where black's pieces can still swarm in to attack it. Black already has a lot of really strong moves here, and one that I very much like but that wasn't played by Magnus is bishop to c2, continuing to sacrifice material. Because after the queen would take, now the queen could take on d4, give a check, the king has to step back, the rook comes in with another check, the knight has to block, and now after takes, and the rook takes, now either the queen has to sacrifice itself or the king goes to f3 and then it's immediately checkmate with queen to e3. And what makes this bishop move even more brilliant is that white cannot even avoid taking it. For example, after something like queen to d2, black would have the incredible move knight to g4, sacrificing it, and after white takes, queen g5, together with rook e8 again, and the queen falls here as well. But okay, Magnus did not pick this move, he instead took on d4 immediately with the knight, which is also a very nice tactical move. Because what would happen if now the queen would take the knight is that the queen can go to e7, give a check, and now either the king steps away and now the rook wins the queen, or if the knight would block, then black can take, and after takes, the bishop comes to c4, also picking up the queen. So because black is also threatening a fork on c2 again, white rather just moved the king away. Magnus played bishop to c5, lining up the bishop with the king and threatening deadly discovered checks with the knight. That means that if white would just do now anything, for example developing move like knight to h3, then the knight could just come to c2, attack the rook, and because the bishop is giving check, white can't do anything about it. That's why white chose to attack the bishop with the knight. And instead of retreating, Magnus found another great move, which was bishop to c2, attacking the queen. And there really isn't anything white can do to protect the queen, because after something like queen to d2, the knight could come to b3, again the bishop gives a check, the knight attacks the queen, so the queen is gonna fall in the next move. Queen to e1 also doesn't work, because of knight to f5. The bishop again gives a check, and after the knight takes, the queen is coming in with a check. The only thing white can do is block with the queen, but then of course black can take, and it is checkmate. So white decided to sacrifice the queen, and instead took the bishop on c5. Magnus takes the queen, the rook takes back, and now the queen comes into e7, attacking the knight on c5, so white decides to protect it with pawn to b4. So what is the situation now? Well, black has a queen, but white has a bishop, a rook, and also a pawn for it. This does sound like material is pretty equal, but of course that's not really fair to say, because all of these pieces are still on the back rank and not playing at all, so it means that black is still hugely on top right now. Magnus played rook to e8, and now of course black cannot take the knight, because then queen to e1 would immediately be checkmate. So white chose to play bishop to d3, finally developing that piece. The queen came in with a check, the king had to step back, and now Magnus attacked the knight with b6. The knight went back to e4, it was traded, and Magnus played pawn to c5. White took, and here Magnus came in with another rook sacrifice, rook took the bishop on e4. Point being that when white takes back, the queen and the knight together will be way too strong against this king and the rook, and because these two pieces really aren't playing, this is more than enough for black. The queen gave a check, king stepped to the side, another check by taking the pawn, and after the king went to f2, another check on c2. Again the king has to step back because the rook is attacked, and now Magnus took the pawn on c5, and white here already resigned. And he did that because there's really nothing he can do against this queen and knight combination. This knight cannot move out because that would lead to checkmate immediately, that means the rook cannot move out, and with only the rook there's nothing to do. We can look at one more sample line how it could have went. For example, if rook to d2 attacking the queen, now black could play queen to e4 giving a check, and now even if finally the knight comes out and blocks the check, black always would have tactics like trading on e2 and afterwards giving a check on b1, which leads to the loss of the other rook. And at the latest, white would have resigned here. I hope you found this game as exciting as I do. Magnus really showing here how powerful Gambits can be. And playing with an energy right from the start that is rarely seen in his games makes this one special to me. Hope you enjoyed. If you did, consider leaving a like. I'd love to know what you thought about it in the comments. And of course consider to subscribe to not miss more of these videos. Thank you very much.